West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now is House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York. And, you know, I do want to get to the very most important thing we have to talk about, which is, of course, the debt ceiling and the debt limit. But I do need to talk about Kevin McCarthy. Because today he couldn't even answer a very straightforward question about probably the most embarrassing member of his caucus, George Santos. I just want to play that for you just for a moment.
I think I would like the House to take up this work and look at it, and if it rises to that occasion, then, because as we look to all these differences, I mean, we just had a report come out from Durham. What does that say about Adam Schiff? He lied to the American public. Should he be expelled from Congress as well?
Okay, first of all, that is insane. Adam Schiff is barely mentioned in the Durham report, 3 sort of passing mentions of him. He is not at issue here. And that is who you all are negotiating with about the debt limit. Is he taking the debt limit more seriously than he's taking the presence of a potential felon in his caucus?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you,
Thank you.
Joy. You know, George Santos is a serial fraudster. He does not belong anywhere near the House of Representatives. He defrauded the people of the 3rd Congressional District in New York, lied about everything, lied about his life, lied about his jobs, lied about his finances, lied about his professional experiences, lied about being Jewish. He perpetrated a fraud on the people of New York. He was elected under false pretenses. And so I commend Congressman Garcia for bringing this privileged resolution forward. And the real question is, are House Republicans going to stand on the side of truth or stand on the side of George Santos? It's important to mention, Santos was referred to the Ethics Committee months ago.
Right.
So what are we doing? You're either going to hold him accountable under the Constitution or you're not. It's going to be interesting to see how the so-called moderates in terms of New York House Republicans vote.
Right.
They've all said that they want him out,
right,
that he doesn't belong in the House of Representatives. Tomorrow, they will have an opportunity to vote their word.
So that is going to come to the floor, right? And as you said, you're going to find out, we will all find out whether House moderates, to the extent that there are any House moderates left in the Republican Party, will vote him out. But on the debt limit, there is, in theory, a way that you could bring a privileged resolution to see how serious those same House moderates are about averting an economic catastrophe. That's what Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, said. It would be a disaster for every person in this country economically. It would cause a recession, et cetera. Do you believe that there are enough Republicans who would vote if you did a privileged resolution to force a vote on whether or not we should allow ourselves to crash over the debt limit?
Well, that's an open question and remains to be seen, although I do think that we're going to have to probe those Republicans and they should be held accountable for their positions that were previously taken, which is to vote with the extremists on the Default on America Act,
right,
which would dramatically cut Medicaid spending for disabled children and seniors in their golden years, dramatically cut education, dramatically cut public safety funding, dramatically cut healthcare, dramatically cut food and nutrition assistance. Draconian cuts that the American people find objectionable all across the country. And, you know, we were essentially given a choice by some of the extreme MAGA Republicans: accept the Default on America Act or accept an actual default that would destroy millions of jobs, crash the stock market, hurt retirees, and skyrocket costs. Neither of those two choices are acceptable. And I think in the meeting today, which was positive because it was cordial, it was candid, and there's a potential path forward, Leader Schumer, President Biden, myself, we all made clear, default is not acceptable, and neither is a take it or leave it approach.
The Washington Post reports that in that meeting that you were all in, the Democratic side, perhaps even yourself, offered up closing tax loopholes. You hear a lot of talk from Republicans about we need to close excessive loopholes. That was rejected summarily. That is what the Washington Post reports. Is that accurate?
Well, it is accurate that we had a real conversation about the appropriate way to deal with the deficit. President Biden produced the budget in March. It's a budget that will strengthen and protect Social Security. It's a budget that will build an economy that works for everyday Americans and reduce the deficit by $3 trillion by doing things like closing tax loopholes for big pharma, closing tax loopholes for big oil, and finding other areas where you can eliminate that type of waste or fraud or abuse. And the Republicans indicated they had a different perspective about it.
Right.
But our view is you can't have a real conversation about deficit reduction if you want to take revenues and closing tax loopholes off the table.
Right.
And again, we're not interested in a take it or leave it approach. And that was made clear.
Is a privilege resolution on the table? Is this something you're seriously considering, meaning going around Kevin McCarthy and simply forcing a vote on the floor about an up or down limit, a debt limit increase?
Well, my view is that all options have to be on the table, and we've got to explore every opportunity to avoid a catastrophic and dangerous default. So one of the options that could be available to us is a discharge petition.
Right.
Now, that doesn't go live until tomorrow, and we'll have to have a conversation about the best way to proceed, but it will require not just the signatures of 213 Democrats, but as you pointed out in your opening question to me, we'd also have to find at least 5 Republicans to do the right thing. And my view is, look, we should just be able to find common ground with the fierce urgency of now, because a dangerous default will be bad for everyone.
Right.
And this is a reckless thing. We have a constitutional responsibility to protect the full faith and credit of the United States of America. It can't be done in a hostage-taking situation. It seemed to be a better approach taken by my Republican colleagues in the meeting today in understanding the urgency of moving forward. And it was agreement that there is no way out of this manufactured crisis unless we can reach a bipartisan agreement about moving forward. Our view continuing to be that the debt ceiling should be raised in a clean way, consistent with what was done under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. But of course, we can have a simultaneous conversation about the budget, about appropriations, because we do that every year.
Right.
In determining what's the right mix of spending and revenue and investments to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people.
I do have to ask you just about dealing with this caucus. I mean, you do have Paul Gosar, who's employing a white nationalist, who himself has made some white nationalist commentary that, you know, you would think 10 years ago even a Republican would be shoved out of Congress or forced out. He's still there. You have the Matt Gaetzes of the world. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who are out vocally supporting the choking death of Jordan Neely, which has been determined in your state of New York, my home state of New York, as being a homicide. and they're out vocally supporting him, as is a former colleague of yours in the House, Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida. And I would find it difficult to work with people under those circumstances. But I wonder what you make of this rush to support vigilantism before there's even been an adjudication of that Jordan Nearly case.
Well, extreme MAGA Republicans portray themselves as the party of law and order. That's phony, that's fake, that's false. They continue to demonstrate that they are the party of lawlessness and disorder. That's why they're supporting Santos. That's why they appear to be supporting vigilante action. They've done this before. They did it in Wisconsin. This is who they are. They want to defund the FBI. They want to impeach the FBI director, who, by the way, was appointed by Donald Trump.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they bend the knee to the insurrectionists in chief. They've become, in large measure, the party of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, George Santos, and of course, former President Donald Trump. That's who they are.
Right.
That's the reality. They are extreme. And it's our hope that we can find some reasonable Republicans on the other side of the aisle to help get us out of this default crisis and to figure out the common ground to move forward in a way that respects freedom and liberty and justice for all people. Not just the privileged few.
I do have to ask about one more New Yorker, Alvin Bragg, who has become a focus for Republicans, and they always throw in George Soros, another New Yorker, who they love to demonize. What do you make of this constant second guessing of his decisions on who to prosecute and who not to prosecute when it comes to both the man who strangled Jordan Nearly or choked Jordan Nearly and also, obviously, Donald Trump?
Well, the extreme MAGA Republicans have clearly been directed to go after Alvin Bragg because they're just bending the knee to the insurrectionist in chief, who has ordered them, apparently, to try to demonize Alvin Bragg because he doesn't want to face the music. But I think Alvin Bragg is a good and decent man. He's got an extraordinary track record in law enforcement, former federal prosecutor, exemplary record, and I believe he's going to continue to follow the facts, apply the law, be guided by the Constitution, and present the information to the jury, present the information to the American people, and then we can all make our own decisions about the way forward. But no one in America is above the law. That includes the former president.
It is Wednesday, the 17th of May of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the Yorkshire Terrier, is our hostess who will be seating you directly. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. Well, here we are. After Election Day, and what a day it was. I noticed that whenever the Oregon election division would give notices on social media about, cutoff dates, when to get your ballot in, et cetera, how to cure your ballot if there's some sort of mistake, where to go to vote in person. Boy, Republicans really hate voting, and they hate it when people are told or informed how to vote. It's amazing the shift that is taken. And also, I love some of the resignation, too, in the comments. Oh, we'll never get what we want. We'll never get it. Here in Oregon, they complain that 3 cities control everything in the state. And I'm like, hey, people vote. Vacant land does not. Get a clue. Jeez. Then I love this other part, too. There's some people who have just a little bit of knowledge. And they see that the electoral system, the Electoral College elected Trump, in spite of the fact that the majority of America did not. And they acknowledge that. And they want a similar sort of system, a college, an electoral college, here in the state of Oregon, because that's the only way their voices will be heard. And I'm like, when will they ever shut up? I mean, my God, I wish their voice was not heard. We cannot avoid it. They don't get what they want. They want to take their ball and go home. And where's home? They're going to make it up. Oh, we're just going to take this border and move it and call it Greater Idaho. Really? Is that what you're going to do? Instead of, how about this? How about knocking on doors? If you think 3 cities are controlling your life, how about getting a delegation of canvassers and walking precincts and knocking on doors and convincing people that of the error of their ways and to join whatever it is that you're proposing, spouting off about? The destruction of representative democracy? Yeah, let's vote on that. They hate voting. They hate America, and they really hate Americans. Vlad is creating a paradise in Russia for MAGAs to go and, I don't know, live in free paradise. White man's freedom. He's advertising it as that. I know what's going to happen as soon as he gets there. Yeah, it's what I proposed. We already have gated communities. Let's lock them in. Turn the guard shacks around. Make sure they don't leave. Okay? ID gets checked on the way out, not on the way in. Let's put it that way. So, yeah, it's a cookbook. But they don't know and they don't care. As long as they can pretend that they don't have to live around all those people, which is us. That's why we're called the U.S. They hate us. Let's not forget that. So, some good news out in Florida. Ron DeSantis thinks that his brand of whatever it is, it's fascism. It's Nazism. It's a conglomeration with a pretty much an American spin. Anyway, looks like some Democratic wins in some long-held Republican offices. That's right. So you know what's going to happen. He's going to pull a Jacksonville, Mississippi for Jacksonville, Florida, and just take over the county and the town. You know the town and the county is the same. Apparently, it's big. He'll just take it over, just like they did Mississippi. Those stupid liberals, especially the black ones, they don't know how to govern. We'll have to do it for them. Yeah, it's like, the destruction of Reconstruction all over again. Hi there. You have a right to vote? Silly person. I don't know. Would they have called him a person? I doubt it. So, why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you today, and move on because we could just rant all day, and that's what sometimes we do. All right, because time is a-wasting, and we've got a busy day in real life, and we may be torn away again. Sorry about yesterday. We had a last-minute emergency, and I wasn't able to get back to the microphone in time. So, I won't go too far into it, but we had to get to the dentist real quick for my mom, and that's what we did. So, sorry about yesterday. You can still get the full show in the podcast, so look for that. And so, as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So at the top, that was House Democratic Leader Jeffries hopes to find some reasonable Republicans to prevent the default crisis. Let's hope that happens. Then on the rest of the menu, the Secret Service is investigating how an unidentified man entered National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's home undetected by his protective detail. What is it about these guys? Are they drinking with prostitutes again? Arizona announced a crackdown on Medicaid fraud targeting tribal communities. And Wells Fargo agreed to pay $1 billion to settle a shareholders' class action lawsuit. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Department of Justice announced a series of criminal cases involving the flow of technology and information to Russia, China, and Iran. And the Cyprus Finance Ministry has frozen more than 1.2 billion euros in Russian assets. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, please. Please, we always need help because the bills around here are, I gotta say, they're not small. Let's put it that way. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to pool those with other like-minded individuals, funds they've sent us, and then we are able to put a big dent in those bills and expenses to keep this powerhouse of resistance resisting. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. And there's no joke about that. Thank you, truly. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, and we thank Tom for doing that. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam, of course. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, and you can always find the list of diaries over many, many years. Yeah, almost from the beginning of Daily Codes. But you can find that by going to my social media feeds, because the link's right there. There you go. You're right at Daily Codes. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts. Please do at Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, wherever podcasts can be found. Deezer is still around, and they still are generating podcasts out there in the world. Well, generating the fact that they can put them out in the world. Anyway, let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it's out of the Washington Post by Carol Lenig and Tyler Pager. The U.S. Secret Service is investigating how a man entered the home of President Biden's national security advisor in the middle of the night roughly 2 weeks ago without being detected by agents guarding his house. And that's according to 3 government officials, so you need 3. The unknown man walked into Jake Sullivan's home about 3 a.m. one night in late April, and Sullivan confronted the individual, instructing him to leave, 2 of the people briefed on the incident said. There were no signs of forced entry at the home, according to one of the people. Sullivan has a round-the-clock Secret Service detail, but agents stationed outside the house were unaware that an intruder had gotten inside the home, located in the West End neighborhood of Washington, until the man had already left, and Sullivan came outside to alert the agents. The intruder appeared to be intoxicated and confused about where he was, according to people briefed on the incident. There was no evidence the person knew Sullivan or sought to harm him. In a statement, the Secret Service said it has launched an investigation into the incident and how the intruder accessed Sullivan's home undetected. I have an idea. 3 a.m.? Somebody was sleeping on the job. The agency said it considered the security breach a matter of significant concern. Do you think? While the protectee was unharmed, we are taking this matter seriously and have opened a comprehensive mission assurance investigation to review all the facts of what occurred, Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi said in a statement in response to an inquiry from the Washington Post. Any deviation from our protective protocols is unacceptable, and if discovered, personnel will be held accountable. Yeah, heads will roll. Guglielmi said the Secret Service has deployed additional security precautions for Sullivan and around his home, pending the completion of the investigation. The White House declined to comment. Normally, anyone intruding on the property of a person protected by the Secret Service would be detained for questioning, then most likely arrested and charged with trespassing. But people familiar with the incident said the person who entered Sullivan's home departed the scene before Secret Service agents were alerted to his presence. Associated Press staff brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs and other top state officials announced a crackdown yesterday, Tuesday, on Medicaid fraud, particularly honing in on illegitimate group homes. The Hobbs administration said many of those homes target tribal community members and have defrauded the state out of hundreds of millions of dollars. An investigation that involved the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office has resulted in at least 45 indictments by the Office of Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays. Mays said $75 million has been seized or recovered to or related to the schemes. Authorities said the money was paid out by the state's Medicaid program, the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, and the illegal activity involved billing for mental health treatment and addiction rehabilitation that never was provided. The Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System has since suspended payments to more than 100 providers, and the agency expects more in the coming months. New actions that were announced include a third-party forensic audit examining mental health and addiction provider claims since 2019, new processes for concerning or unusual claims, and an overhaul of the fraud detection methods used. Prior to my administration, the AHCCCS has taken a piecemeal approach to targeting these fraudulent providers, Hobbs said. Under my administration, this will change. Together, we are going to bring about the systemic forces we need to root out this problem and deliver true accountability. Daniel Scarpinato, who served as chief of staff for Hobbs' predecessor, Republican Governor Doug Ducey, was critical of the announcement of the crackdown. The investigation revealed today has been underway for several years, well before the current occupants took office. And Hobbs and Mays appeared at a news conference that also included representatives of 13 tribes around the state. of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Wells Fargo has agreed to pay $1 billion to settle a lawsuit filed by its shareholders who allege the bank made misleading statements about its compliance with federal regulators after a fake account opening scandal came to light in 2016. The class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of hundreds of thousands of public employees of Rhode Island and Mississippi whose retirement funds had invested in Wells Fargo. A federal judge in New York on Tuesday granted preliminary approval of the settlement that was filed late Monday. Wells Fargo has been sanctioned repeatedly by U.S. regulators for violations of consumer protection laws going back to 2016, when employees were found to have opened millions of accounts illegally in order to meet unrealistic sales goals. In addition to inflating sales figures that boosted the company's stock, the actions by Wells employees caused damage to customers' credit scores and cost some of them money and fees. San Francisco-based Wells remains under a Federal Reserve order forbidding the bank from growing any larger until the Fed deems that its internal oversight problems are resolved. That order, originally enacted in 2018, was expected to last only a year or two. Since then, executives repeatedly boasted that Wells was cleaning up its act only for the bank to be found in violation of other parts of consumer protection law, including in its auto and mortgage lending businesses. The shareholder lawsuit related to the settlement, announced yesterday, Tuesday, alleged that between May of 2018 and March of 2020, the bank and its senior executives repeatedly told investors that regulators were satisfied with the bank's progress under the consent orders and that the asset cap would be timely removed. However, federal regulators did not lift the cap and more scandals surfaced. In a statement about the settlement, Wells Fargo said, "While we disagree with the allegations in this case, we are pleased to have resolved this matter." Well, that's simple. Last year, Wells agreed to pay $3.7 billion to settle charges that it harmed customers by charging illegal fees and interest on auto loans and mortgages, as well as incorrectly applying overdraft fees against savings and checking accounts. Since the fake account scandal came to light in 2016, Wells has paid out billions in fines to state and federal regulators, reshuffled its board of directors, and seen 2 CEOs and other top-level executives leave the company. Wells Fargo's reputation has never fully recovered from the sales scandal. Before the scandal, Wells Fargo was considered to have a sterling reputation among the big banks, but behind the scenes, Wells' top management was pushing sales goals that were both aggressive, unrealistic, and illegal. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, themes are not just for 8th grade book reports. One of the joys of the Marvel flicks is finding quality where you least expect it, like in Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I mean, where the first one felt zippy and fresh and argued that there's moral and emotional righteousness when heterogeneous groups work together against divisive homogeneous totalitarians, the second one did fall into familiar action movie central white male daddy issue land. And, as She-Hulk so aptly pointed out, they doubled down, 2 daddies, same issues. But I have a friend who had just lost her father who found it very moving. We all bring different things to stories and take different things from them. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 takes a step back from central male myopia and a step towards an ensemble film, which, yay, if only because Team Guardians has made all these great characters whom we don't want to see just as Peter Quill love interests and Star-Lord second bananas. Also, rather than having one's past trauma-generated emotional issues magically resolved at the end of 2.5 hours, here we end with characters realizing they must face what they're avoiding so their work can begin. The former narrative is more immediately gratifying, yes, but I argue the latter is more relevant to our lives. For instance, Peter Quill must confront his obsessiveness. Appropriately, our villain, the High Evolutionary, serves as Quill's foil because his obsession to make a perfect world drives him to destructive cruelty. He differs from Quill and crew in that he works to gratify himself, while they, ultimately, work to better things for others. That's why good Guardians stories, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, put our heroes against backdrops of groups and societies. Guardians movies, as valuable for what they say as what they do. Don't worry, Volume 3 does a lot. There are killer fight scenes, great Groot and Drax moments, and a rocket backstory that is much, much more harrowing than you're ready for. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
We're here today to talk about time travel, a perennial, dare I say timeless, topic of science fiction. But is it possible? Is there any chance at all that it could actually happen?
No. Well, okay, kinda, but not really. I'm Lee Billings.
I'm Clara Moskowitz, and this is Cosmos Quickly, the bi-weekly space podcast from Scientific American. We're going to have a little friendly debate.
Really, Clara? I came for a throwdown.
Well, a wrangle, a parlay, a confab. Lee, what do you have against time travel?
So I love the idea of time travel, and in fact, I do it all the time. Like most everyone else, I'm traveling into the future at 1 second per second. I'm less of a fan, though, of more speculative time travel, which is good fodder for goofy sci-fi stories, but in the real world, it's an implausible distraction.
But really, we can stay within plausible physics and still see how more extreme versions of time travel are possible. See, Einstein's special theory of relativity shows that the rate time flows at depends on how fast you're moving.
Einstein strikes again. What a rascal.
If you're traveling in a starship at close to the speed of light, you'll still experience the familiar 1 second per second ticking of a clock. But an observer back on Earth would see your clock moving glacially slow. To them, you'd be moving through time at a snail's pace. That means that when you finally got back, maybe only a year would have passed for you, but a century could have gone by for your friends on Earth. Ergo, you just traveled to the future.
Right. No one's disputing any of that. We can even measure this sort of time dilation right now on Earth, not with starships, but with subatomic particles. Some of those particles have very short lifetimes, decaying almost instantaneously. But if we drastically speed them up like in a particle accelerator, we find they endure longer in proportion to how fast they're going. So riddle me this, Clara. How might we travel into the past? That's something so hard to do, effectively impossible almost, that it's scarcely worth thinking about.
This is what makes time travel possible. The flux capacitor.
I get it. No one has yet conceived of a way to journey to the past. But the crazy thing is, it's not impossible. Time is just one of the 4 dimensions in the universe, along with 3 dimensions of space. And we move through space in all directions just fine. So according to physics, travel through time should be just as possible. One way that people have looked into this is via a wormhole, a shortcut bridge through space-time that was predicted by general relativity. Wormholes can connect distant points in space-time, meaning you could conceivably use one to bridge not just the gap between here and a distant galaxy, but the span between 2023 and 1923.
There, that's it. That's the wormhole.
You say it, don't spread it, huh? It's a sphere. Well, of course it is. What you thought it would just be a hole.
Ah, yes, wormholes, the last refuge of scoundrels and desperate physicists. The trouble with wormholes, Clara, is that unlike a DeLorean, we have no evidence they actually exist. And even if they did, it seems the only way to make them traversable and stable involves using negative energy or negative mass to prop them open. And guess what? Just like wormholes themselves, we have no evidence these weird forms of matter and energy actually exist either. And let's just beat this dead horse one more time. Even if wormholes exist as well as the means to make them traversable, to actually go back in time seems to require anchoring one end in a region of very warped space-time, like around a big black hole, or accelerating it to nearly light speed. Are you sensing a theme here, Clara?
Yeah. All I can say is that just because there's no evidence any of these things exist, there's also no evidence they don't or can't exist. Wormholes are real solutions to the equations of general relativity. And even negative energy and mass are concepts that come up in the math and aren't prohibited.
Well, how about some more practical arguments then? If time travel were possible, wouldn't we have met some time travelers by now? Wouldn't someone have gone back and killed Hitler, or at least prevented me from wearing that ridiculous outfit to my high school prom? You know, there's a famous story about physicist Stephen Hawking who invited time travelers to come to a party he was holding. The trick was, the party happened in 2009, but the invitation came out in a miniseries that was broadcast in 2010. Thus, only time travelers would have been able to attend.
Here is the invitation, giving the exact coordinates in time and space. I am hoping copies of it, in one form or another, will survive for many thousands of years.
And sadly, the hors d'oeuvres went uneaten, the champagne sat unopened, because clearly, time travel to the past is impossible.
I admit a party with Stephen Hawking should have been pretty alluring to time travelers if they were out there. But you're forgetting about the international clause of secrecy that all time travelers probably have to swear to, making sure to hide their identities and abilities from those in earlier eras.
Yes, the clause of secrecy. Feels like we're really veering into science-fictional special pleading territory here. Let's not also forget the paradoxes that we have to worry about too, which might explain such prohibitions. There are lots of good reasons to think time travel might introduce insurmountable paradoxes in physics, the most famous being the grandfather or grandmother paradox. If time travel were possible into the past, so the thinking goes, then a person could go back in time and kill their own grandparents, thus making it impossible for them to be born, and impossible for them to travel back in time to ever commit that murder, and so on and so on.
I wonder if it could be like the many worlds scenario, where each change a time traveler makes to the past spawns a whole new universe that carries on from that point. So, if I went back in time and killed one of my forebears, then a new branch universe would begin, where that whole line of descendants, including me, never existed. I mean, it sounds crazy, but then again, physics is pretty enamored with multiverses, and they seem to pop up for lots of reasons already. Maybe it's not impossible?
If not impossible, then I'd say implausible.
Well, I'm forever an optimist, Lee. Thanks for listening to Cosmos Quickly.
Our show is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Our music was composed by Dominic Smith.
If you like the show, please consider rating or leaving a review. You can also email feedback, questions, and tips to sciencequickly@sciam.com.
For more space-time hijinks and all your science news, head to sciam.com. This has been Cosmos Quickly. I'm Lee Billings.
I'm Clara Moskowitz.
And we'll see you next time in the future.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean. And there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Warning! This Civil Liberties Minute contains a gruesome description of a mass murder. I'm Bill Newman, and we'll give another second here for people to turn off their radios. Recently, the editor-in-chief of The Week magazine, William E. Falk, described a police officer rushing to the scene of a mass shooting in Allen, Texas, coming upon bloody, torn bodies scattered on the ground next to the dead killer and his assault rifle, including a little girl whose face was no longer. No mainstream publication, including his, the editor wrote, would publish such photos for many reasons. The need for family consent, preserving the dignity of the dead, and the sensibility of readers. But then the editor recalled the importance of images in our history. The photo of Emmett Till, the image of the 9-year-old Vietnamese girl burned by napalm, the photos of Iraqis tortured at Abu Ghraib, the George Floyd video. The editor raised the question whether the media's withholding gruesome images from mass murders is anesthetizing the public, whether that self-censorship serves the interest of reporting the news as the country continues to consider what action, if any, to take with regard to rapid-fire, high-capacity assault rifles. He raises the question whether that self-censorship is something we, the public, actually need and deserve or want. After all, if we really don't want to look, we can turn the page or turn off the TV. Or the radio. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals schools that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit already, expecting a high in the low to mid 90s, which is nearly the same as yesterday, except it got more towards the upper 90s, but hey, who's counting? A mix of clouds and sun. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then a few passing clouds overnight. Lows in the upper 50s, winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then abundant sunshine tomorrow with a forecast in the high 80s, low 90s. We'll see about that. It could be warmer. Winds out of the west northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated very high in our little hamlet of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 28 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the very high range at level 8, so take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.98 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is dropping as now at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that's why it's called the Weather Underground. Yes. London is 63 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 63 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 68 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 75 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 60 degrees with light rain. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. And Tokyo is 71 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 52 degrees with rain. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is 62 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Eric Tucker at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? The Justice Department announced a series of criminal cases yesterday, Tuesday, tracing the illegal flow of sensitive technology, including Apple's software code for self-driving cars and materials used for missiles, to foreign adversaries like Russia, China, and Iran. Some of the alleged trade secret theft highlighted by the department dates back several years, but U.S. officials are drawing attention to the collection of cases now to highlight a task force created in February to disrupt the transfer of goods to foreign countries. We are committed to doing all we can to prevent these advanced tools from falling into the hands of adversaries who wield them in a way that threatens not only our nation's security, but democratic values everywhere, said Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson, who does not have an accent like that whatsoever. Okay, just letting you know. And he has the Justice Department's National Security Division. One of the newly unsealed cases in federal court in San Francisco accuses a former Apple software engineer of taking proprietary data related to self-driving cars before his last day at the company in 2018 and then boarding a one-way flight to China on the night that FBI agents were conducting a search at his house. Prosecutors say the defendant, identified as Weibao Wang, is believed to be now working at a China-based autonomous vehicle competitor. Other cases disclosed have resulted in arrests. One defendant, Leming Li, age 64, was arrested earlier this month on charges that he stole thousands of sensitive files from his California employer, including technology that can be used in the manufacturing of nuke submarines and military aircraft, and used them to help competing Chinese businesses. He's been in custody since his arrest. A lawyer who has been representing him declined to comment, and I wonder why. Additionally, two Russian nationals, Oleg Sergeyevich Patsula and Vasily Sergeyevich Besedin, were arrested in Arizona this month on charges of conspiring to send aircraft parts to Russian airline companies. Lawyers for both men did not immediately return phone messages seeking comment. The Justice Department also unsealed a separate criminal case accusing a Chinese national of conspiring to transmit isostatic graphite, a material that can be used in the nose of intercontinental ballistics, to Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions. And it charged a Greek national with participating in the smuggling of dual-use technology with a military application, including quantum cryptography, to Russia. The Departments of Justice and Commerce and other agencies earlier this year launched the Disruptive Technology Strike Force as a way to prevent U.S. adversaries from acquiring sensitive technology and address what officials said is a growing problem.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Manolos Hadjikostas of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Some 1.2 billion euros, the equivalent of 1.3 billion US, in Russian-owned assets managed by Cyprus-registered companies were frozen in compliance with sanctions imposed on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine, Cyprus's finance ministry said yesterday, Tuesday. The ministry said the vast majority of those assets were held in European Union credit institutions, and the entire amount came on top of 105 million euros frozen by banks in Cyprus. The finance ministry said an error owed to the European Commission receiving incomplete information, and an error since rectified by updating a relevant database. Meanwhile, The Cypriot government is stepping up its supervisory capacity to ensure compliance with international sanctions by setting up a specialized unit modeled after the UK's Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. According to the ministry, the Cyprus government is also keen on joining a European Commission program on supporting the effective and uniform implementation of sanctions. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.